Hi.
Hello, Jackie. We
Maybe
might
we
just.
just are to have the
I think we will. I think we will.
just have the
Yeah.
mystical experience.
Oh yeah, yeah. Look, I was just feeling to what was on my mind was just sharing a little around the first time I met you and just the impact you had on me and how it's kind of like yeah, we were in Sydney and remember a friend of ours, a mutual friend of ours, Karen had texted me the night before night before meeting you, and just to give a little bit of a background, I recall around that time that I really feel like I pulled away from everything and everyone, and was living on my own, and there's a lot of kind of just withdrawal and things occurring, and I remember so clearly when I met you, there was actually something, it was something very quite innocent that you were communicating to another friend of ours, Ross, about just a communication around a change of venue. There was going to be a meeting at a cafe or something, and it was like your words that you spoke that day, it was like they penetrated something in me or reactivated something in me, very, on a very deep kind of level. And I do remember a series of things occurring even that day for us. It was almost like me meeting you and hearing and feeling where you were coming from. It actually suddenly, I remember as we continued to join as that afternoon went on. It turned out that we were in Sydney at the time, and you were going to be, in a couple of weeks' time, you were going to be 800 miles north in a town in Queensland. I think it might have been Ipswich, house sitting a place, and I was actually going to be in that vicinity too. So we ended up meeting then, and we ended up having a series of meetings over those next coming months. And I just wanted to share that and just acknowledge my gratitude for you and your, the depth of your calling and your devotion, because it really touched me, and I feel actually helped awaken me from a slumber that I was in. So thank you so much, Jackie.
Oh, that's beautiful to hear, Colin. I feel that the very purpose for that day was to answer that deep calling in your heart. I felt it was there was a recognition there, and I had the same recognition. There's a deep calling here, and it's in the spirit. It was my own calling too, and I do remember exactly what happened around that. There was a change of venue because this to me it's not a social endeavor. It's a calling of the heart for truth. And we talked about where is integrity, because the place we were to meet was a cafe, which was going to be noisy, difficult for true communication and the depth that I could feel the calling was for. And so it was better to actually cancel altogether, and come together in prayer to see what was to happen then. It's like in every moment, the prayer has to be answered. And I feel that was what I was expressing. In the end, we did meet in someone's house, and there was a true expression of the purpose for coming together. It wasn't just to meet and have coffee and have a chat. It was to actually be all together in a much higher purpose of cleansing the mind of everything that gets in the way of that. And we talked about where is integrity. It's integrity in the spirit's direction. Integrity is not on a horizontal level. There's no obligation to people. There's only a desire and an obligation to follow what the spirit gives in every moment. And I feel that was all yeah, for both of us, a lot of what happened in Australia was the calling that was being answered for all of us, I feel.
Oh, that's beautiful. If you could share anything around, you shared with me once a parable around, I think it was sort of around the time, or it may have been a little after the time you met David Hoffmeister, and I don't know, I don't recall all the details, so you just fill in whatever feels inspired around this. And it had to do with a feeling in your heart of introducing Kirsten, who I understand was going through, she had some brain injuries or something around that time, or head injuries, introducing her to David, and just, it actually, I remember when you told me the story, it was actually, it had a lot of humour to it, that suddenly not only did David come and meet her, but he actually, they ended up joining in a very deep way, and Kirsten ended up heading off and travelling with David. So I was wondering if you could share a little around that, anything that comes to you, and just how that transpired and unfolded. Thanks, Jackie.
Yeah, sure, sure. Yeah, the course group that I'd belonged to, I'd been going to for a couple of years, and the guy who ran the course group was a dear man who every time he read from the course, he cried, tears rolled down his face because he was so moved by the love. And that was how I received the course. It was a love letter, and I've never been that great on quoting it, because it's more a feeling for me. It's a call that to the spirit that reflects my own heart, and so that's how I receive it. But there was a point where a friend of mine who was in the same course group, we both felt it, that we needed something deeper. Just coming together and reading the course and following through on the lessons was not enough. We needed someone who really was living uncompromisingly this message that Jesus was giving us. And we did some research on the internet and found David, and he was the one who clearly was meeting the desire that we had. And so, interestingly, he was to come down to Australia. He'd been invited down to Australia to do a tour that very year. And we then contacted him and said, could we piggyback on the back of that tour? It did turn out to be possible. And Kirsten had a head injury, the second head injury that year, had isolated herself, and I'd actually gone and hauled her out of a place of where she was shutting down and meditating many hours a day, probably only functioning for 3 hours a day at that point, and brought her back and taken her to my course group, introduced her to some the way of the heart, which was Jesus' teachings, and some meditations, and then took her to the course group. And interestingly, the course was the only thing she could read to concentrate for any length of period of time, because her concentration had gone as a result of the head injury. And she actually escaped back down to the to the South Island just before David arrived. And I made a call to her and when he arrived and arrived at our house, and said, you have to come back. You must come. And so she did. Miraculously, she found a flight where the price actually went down the more she looked at the website. So it was very given. And she finished up being able to be funded by the Accident Compensation Corporation, which is an entity in New Zealand which supports people who have accidents, even though she said she wanted to go to the States and work part-time for this organization. So one miracle followed another, really. So she went, And the next time I saw her was 6 months later when she applied for a visa. And in the meantime, had got deeply into the teachings and wanted to go back to the States. And I could feel the absolute rightness of that. And then came back again with David. I'm not sure that we need all this story, but when she came back, there was such a deep shake in the very base of my roots, like, okay, this is what I called for. I called for a way of living this, and she's doing it, and she's calling me out now. And one of the things that really pushed my buttons was when she said, she started calling me Jackie, and that was really not a problem. She'd done that quite often, but it was when she talked about her biological mother, and suddenly I really hit the roof. And I was cleaning windows at the time, and just these windows had never been so clean and sparkling because my rage came up, and it was used in that way. What do you mean? I'm your biological mother? It's like this whole concept had to fall apart, and I could feel it coming, and the rage was coming up. So, yeah, so that was the beginning of it for me, of really stepping into opening up to living what Jesus was teaching. And I often say, like she did a lot of it for me. I didn't have to do it because of that relationship that was being washed over that period of time, is because we are all so connected, and because it is one mind healing, there was a lot there that I feel was done for me, just in that, because my desire was so high for God, and this was the way through. And so it feels as though this journey for me in a lot of ways was quite gentle.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, you've sort of already started touching on the I guess the next question in my mind has to do with, like, so much of what we're doing, so much of what the Course in Miracles is the undoing of the concepts that we've made. And I mean, it feels like a very powerful one, or a deep one that you have been releasing and have washed, is that mother-daughter concept. And I was wondering if you could go into that a little more, about, you've touched on those that time. This is probably like 5 or 6 years ago, I guess, is it? And just wondering, because I got the sense when I last spoke to you briefly about this, it sounded like there had been so much washing that had occurred for you around your relationship with Kirsten, that it was like it was gone, So could you just tell us a little bit about that and your relationship, now with Kirsten? That would be great. Thank you.
Yeah, sure. I first met David in 2004, so it's a span of 10 years actually,
Right.
since I first met him, and since Kirsten first came to the Peace House. So it seems like we have over the years come together and been brought together for that very purpose, for the healing of dropping that self-concept, because it was once one that grips you so much and gives you the identity in the world is washed, then the others fall more easily.
Right.
And because all the concepts are in every self-concept, self-responsibility, obligation, duty, or all of the concepts that we choose to name, all the beliefs, those deep core beliefs, are involved. They're somehow tied into every concept that we have of ourselves. And so it felt as though that this one was given as the core. And it was very helpful and used intensely when we came together, And then there was a period of being apart where it was washed in other ways, in other relationships. So, for instance, responsibility as the mother became impossible. I couldn't take responsibility for a woman of 30 who had a head injury, for instance. You know, it wasn't mine to do. And that was obvious. So it started to undo that, and then to be able to see where that sense of responsibility played out in everything else. So it starts in that core relationship and then can be seen everywhere else. That belief plays out that I have to be responsible on a horizontal level to be able to maintain this personhood, this person of Jackie. And so, yes, it does seem as though that one relationship contains all the aspects that need to be washed. And so that's why it seems to have been over a long period of time. But one of the reasons I believe that it has been helpful is because there's a deep sense of trust of the same desire for both of us. And so when it came to a point of that decision, you know, there comes a point where the darkness is so dark, and the point of making the decision to go through it and not being terrified of what's on the other side of it, that decision point, she was the only one who could actually call me on this. And I remember it very clearly. She did. She said, "This is your decision point." And it was only because it came from her where I trusted that this was from the Spirit. This was the Spirit calling me and calling the desire, this deep desire that I have for God. And it seemed to come through that one that I trusted. And so it's been used in such powerful ways, other than undoing. It's actually pointing in the right direction too. So it's been used in so many ways that have been helpful because of that deep sense of this is the desire of both of our hearts, and I feel it, and I trust it, and I know it.
Right. To the point where you two have, you know, presented various kind of gatherings, and I understand you'll be with Kirsten in Sweden offering a retreat, and there'll be other events as well that you'll be doing together. That's correct, isn't it?
Yeah, we're going to be in Ireland together too.
Right.
Yeah, we did a few retreats in New Zealand. It's a topic that people are really interested in. How do we undo this family concept?
Right.
Because it goes beyond mother-daughter, it goes to all other relationships that seem to have that obligation, sense of responsibility, maintaining love, maintaining happiness. It's a deep topic for undoing, and it's undoing the special relationship in all its forms, really.
Yes.
Which is a huge area, because in the end, of course, the special relationship is with this person as an identity.
Right.
And that's what requires the attentiveness. And I do think that supporting each other every time the Spirit brought us together, the attentiveness to what the relationship was being used for was the key. And so now it seems that, you know, I can't dismiss all that mind training, all that we needed.
It was all used.
And it was all used. And now it seems like the attentiveness is not so much on the horizontal level. It was at one time, it was where the mind went out on the horizontal to maintain something. Now it's the attentiveness on the vertical that the mind is so attentive in the spirit now, on a in that true joining that comes from within. It's not actually an external spirit or an external force anymore. It's really the within light that guides, that is everything, that is everywhere. And so when the mind drops from that place to the horizontal, it's so painful, and it's such a contrast now, that just even the recognition of that brings it back immediately. It's like the pain of being a person in the world and relating on that level now is almost the foreign part of the mind, whereas the attentiveness before was in coming to that. So there's a shift in the mind. The mind is there, and now the attentiveness is into actually when that's dropped, there's almost a painful element that has nausea attached to it. It becomes physical too, which means that the mind has gone to the body again as something in relation to something else in the world in a horizontal way. Yeah.
It's like a sort of a good use of almost that, as you described, that nausea, or like, it's like the Holy Spirit teaching through contrast. It's like you can feel the difference so markedly that, your mind doesn't kind of continue with it. That's why I'm hearing you say that, without that mind training, it's almost like there just wasn't the level of awareness. But now that it's so, just there's been so much clearing that you can just feel it when it sort of, if it does for a moment slide onto something else. And it's kind of cool, isn't it, too?
It's fantastic. Yeah. It's fantastic. Actually, it's really interesting because we were talking about that this morning. It's reflected by those who seem to be coming now. Like when the mind was so occupied with washing all the worldly attachments, then the people who came were in that state of mind, of a full mind. And those now who are being drawn are those with spacious, empty minds.
Wow.
It's so interesting because this is just a reflection of the mind, and the oneness of the healing.
Yeah,
it's beautiful. And that where we're all connected, that one place is so vast and so spacious and so clean.
I'm feeling to ask you about something you said to me a few years ago, which was so helpful. It was around the theme of trust, and you said to me something like that you had found it very helpful at one point in your journey to put your trust. You were hearing that you were to put your trust in one other, to start with one other. I think this is how you described it to me. And Jason, our friend Jason Warwick, was the one that you had heard was going to be that one. And in a moment, I'll just get you to sort of talk about that. But from what I recall you saying was that just making that decision in your mind, it sounds like, not only that one relationship, that trust that developed between you and Jason, it sounds like it was a beautiful stepping stone for you to actually go beyond just the trust for one, but to actually expand it out. And so I'd be really interested to hear what you have to say around the topic of trust, and particularly that idea that how at times, one person, one mighty companion could be just what we need as a stepping stone before, say, the more abstract idea of like, joining with the Holy Spirit or connecting with Him, which is what you just talked about a moment ago. So could you talk around that area, Jackie?
Sure, because that really is the Yeah. And I could feel it. When he first came and stayed with us, there was a moment where, and, the words just came, you are the one that the Spirit will come through. You will be my teacher. And I just knew it. It was just such a deep knowing in the heart. And it needed reinforcing in my mind, like that I just needed to keep reinforcing it every time there was a doubt. But what I did was make a very, very deep prayer to the Holy Spirit. Show me, come through this one. And it was really just bringing all of the attention to one place, to one channel. And it was so profound. Like any questions or any doubt thoughts I had, in that prayer, they were washed, because it was like, okay, if there's a doubt thought here, this is a doubt thought that of the ego. This is the ego mind in resistance. I'm trusting that this prayer is answered, and there was a certainty behind that, and I knew it was my way out. It was going 100% in one direction, and it seemed to be just that one that seemed to be given in the mind. And every time there was a doubt, it got washed, because I would be in connection, or I was down in New Zealand at the time. If there was a doubt that came up, there would be a call from Jason. He would be on the phone and he'd say, "Oh, I was just feeling to call you." Wow. And that was enough. It was enough to bring the mind back into alignment of trust. Trust that this is the way, this is the Spirit through this one. And hey, I don't know how it works. It was just the miracle. Who can know, really? I think my faith is so deep, and my trust is so deep. I know it in my heart, and the devotion for God, the absolute 100% desire for God, and to live in that state of peace. And yeah, I don't even know that I can give it words, really. That was the driving force, and so that call, and that prayer, I just trusted, and I think that's where we have to go with it. We have to trust that this is the desire of everyone's heart. It's not just this person. I feel that is the call that we all have. It's just that it's not always recognized. It's covered over by so many other safety mechanisms that we feel we need in the world. Like we need a family, we need a job, we need certainty in the future. It's covered over by all those things. But underneath that, it's what we all desire. And it came up to be seen so clearly. And putting trust in that one was so helpful. And then once the miracles started to happen, and that prayer was so supported, then it started to be more of a, more able to trust what I was hearing. And that was interesting, because I'd had the Spirit come through in a lot of ways in a clinic that I had. I did homeopathic work with mind work and body work and craniosacral work, where the mind comes to a still point. So I'd experienced the Spirit and the vastness of mind in truth, but it was actually almost an escape. It was used more as an escape mechanism out of the world, rather than to bring that through into every moment. It was like it was compartmentalized. It was just in a clinic, just in a certain situations that was allowed into my awareness. But now it had to come into every moment, And this was where it started, trusting that in every moment that the Spirit was available.
Thank you. Yeah. What's coming to mind now is, I know David Hoffmeister teaches this a lot, and it's taught a lot in Course in Miracles, the idea of bringing illusions to the truth, or bringing darkness to the light. And I was just remembering a time when we were together at a retreat in Australia at Mystery Bay, and I don't recall ever actually speaking to you about this, and I've no idea if you even recall it, but I had the feeling that there was quite a deep undoing that was occurring for you around that time. And I was just wondering if there was anything, and it may or may not have to do specifically with that time. It may just be a general answer to that idea of bringing darkness to the light. But I was wondering if you could just talk around that area, and how really what we're doing as soon as we, we give that invitation to, to call and to say, I want truth, I want the peace of God. We're really inviting everything that's not that to come up into our awareness. And let's face it, we don't know what's down there. It's like, these are things that are in the unconscious. And could you just talk around that topic, Jackie?
Yeah, sure. The darkness and the learning had come up in many ways. But there was a point when Jesus says, until you look fully on the extent of your self-hatred, and that is the darkness, then you can't even really start to fully heal. This is the starting point. And there were many things involved in that at the time. And you're right, it was a point of the darkness becoming so overwhelming. And a lot of things came up where I was still trying to hold on to some sort of concept, something that was valuable in the world, pride, responsibility. There were all of it, all seemed to just collapse in. And my mind went totally into darkness at that time. It seemed to be overwhelming the more I stayed in the darkness trying to work it out from there. Because in retrospect, when I look back on it, that was the ego trying to work out the ego and work out the way out of it. And that wasn't going to work. It couldn't work anymore because of the undoing that had happened before that. These steps that had been taken, and like chunks of darkness being worked through, and also I'd had the world fall. I'd had revelatory experiences where I knew there'd been a vision of the world being illusory, no substance to it, and this had happened several times over a period of years. But there was a moment where the whole world collapsed, and what seemed to happen was, because Jesus had been such a huge safety symbol in my mind, what seemed to happen at that point was this thought came into mind: if the world's not real, neither is Jesus. And the terror set in, and I shook for 2 or 3 days. There was a huge fear that came up, and this was the terror, actually, of seeing that this whole thing is an illusion, including the symbols that have been useful. And so that came up again, like, don't let go of this, because it means that even Jesus is not there and available in my mind. And that was the ploy of the extent of the fear of actually letting it all go and truly accepting the truth of bringing all of it to the light, including all the symbols that had been used for. And so it was a very deep time of actually looking on the terror, the absolute terror that is underneath everything. And it's the fear of the light, the fear of the total acceptance and total surrender into that. And it did seem that until the mind pulled out of that darkness, and nobody could really say anything to me that could make that happen. There was support there and comfort. And I've got to say, Kirsten was there at the time, and she would just come and sit with me and lie with me. And that was a great comfort. But nothing could be said that could pull the mind out of that. Only my own desire for truth, and then to just be in total allowance. And it wasn't until the mind raised up out of that darkness and looked on it, as Jesus says, until you actually look on the depth of it, you can't really even know, you can't begin. And so, of course, there was humility there too. My God, everything that I've done so far has meant nothing. That was another part of it, that I had to accept the total humility and humbleness of that place. So all pride of anything that I seemed to think that I, this person, had done before, had to be given up too. Like, who was the I who was even doing anything? So there was a point of the mind rising above that, looking on it, and that was the beginning of true healing. So you're right. It was at that point in time.
I love what you're touching on there. It's like you were describing the great paradox in a way of this journey, is that we can't do it alone, and yet, like, as far as going to the depths, and actually, no one can actually do that. No one can look at the darkness in our own mind. We have to go there ourselves. Do you know what I mean? Like, I could really feel that in what you were saying there. The paradox, really. Like, no one can do it for us.
Exactly.
And yet we can't do it alone. It's like, okay, well, that's just how it is,
Yeah. It's actually, we need each other to come to that point. I feel that's, I can only speak from my own experience. I can't speak from anyone else's. It's and it is highly individualized, but I can certainly be very open in sharing what it seems to have been for me. And yes, there seems to need to be a great deal of support, because when one person is going through some undoing, then there always seems to be someone given who can hold the space of truth and say, I know this is not who you are. I feel the Christ, and I know that the truth of who you are is the stability, is the certainty. And it's then with that support of steadiness and knowingness that that's being held, then everything that's in contrast to that can arise. And you're right, that's why we need each other. We can't do it alone at that level. But when it comes to actually the deepest call for truth and God, this person has nothing to do with that. When the shift happens, I know I had nothing to do with it. That's the miracle.
Beautiful. What's flowing in there? Thank you for that, Jackie. Yeah. What's a question that's sort of formulating in my mind? I'm just looking at it. It's like the idea of, like, I mean, I've got no idea. We've got no idea who's going to listen to this. There's no concern, to be honest. It's kind of like quite
No,
freeing, really. But this question comes in, and um,
yeah,
it's
it's
like it's
lovely.
around, it's around the idea of like if you were to speak to someone who was, say, just on the very beginning stages, or even was at a point where it looked as though they were entering what may have even been like a fairly lengthy period of this darkness that we've kind of just been touching on. I just want to ask you the question: is it worth it? Is this whole journey? Is it worth it? Just yeah. Can you talk around that?
Hands down, I've got to say yes. Absolutely, unequivocally. How many adjectives do you need?
You can use as many as you like. Yeah, yeah. I had
Yes.
a feeling I was going to get a yes.
No, truly, and it doesn't mean that there aren't moments where it feels as though um, you know that the mind drops
Right.
and experiences some pain or some darkness, but it just moves through so quickly
Yeah.
um, again into this place of peace and certainty. There's a
Beautiful.
yeah, there's a looking on the world uh, from such a different place, and knowing um, that nothing in this world is causative, that nothing
Mm.
that that seems to arise leads to anything else, and that doesn't lead to anything else. So that the idea of events being linear and being causative of each other drops,
Mm.
and that truly is is such an acceptance in mind and such a surrender to what's given here now in this moment. And what's given here and now in this moment is where the healing, the cleansing, the washing that's required while I seem to be a body, uh, that's it's available now, and now is every moment. Now is the potential for everything.
Wow. Wow. Thank you. I'm hearing the words two voices, and the question in my mind is: can you talk around the topic? I mean, A Course in Miracles spends. I mean, let's face it, The Course in Miracles is a tool that's actually aimed at egos to undo egos. Like so, and the
Mhm.
course touches on the idea of the two voices, the ego, and what it refers to in the beginning parts of the text is the still small voice, the true voice that's forever still. Can you talk a little around say your experience with as you started to, if you like, step back from that voice, like the egoic voice, and you started to tune in more to what was true in you. Can you tell us how that kind of came to you? Was it like on a feeling level, or did you hear? Just any experiences or parables around that would be wonderful. Yeah, thank you.
Mm. Um, yeah. Uh, I guess even that has shifted over the years. Initially it was trust in hearing the voice from my brother.
Right.
Like the as we spoke about earlier, trust in one brother and know that he is you,
Right.
and that the spirit can come that way. Um, but there'd always been a sense of knowing. Um, it's really interesting because I think what I've been reflecting on most recently is that anything, any action that's ever been taken, anything that's ever been spoken, it was never able to be planned, and it was never, like, even when I did talks, giving lectures to homeopathic students, or talking to mothers and children about in workshops, those sorts of things. Even though there seemed to be some sort of knowledge that had been accumulated that was used, the words that were spoken were never planned, and often, even though there might have been something written down, it so often was ignored because the words came from somewhere beyond. And I can see that was always the case, and I never really questioned it. And even actions or movements that have taken place, like the decision to move, say, from England to New Zealand, it was just given. It was always given. And then somehow, in retrospect, I decided I'd made a decision. Right. So it's how the ego uses the plan, I think. Like the bodies are always going to be moving, and the form will always take place. Then what does the mind do with it? The mind decides that it was in control somehow or other. But actually, we never were. There's almost a realization that none of it ever was controlled or meaningful in any way, other than where the mind could use it for healing. And that seemed to be an inner knowing rather than a voice speaking to me. And it was always there, but when it seemed to need to be more recognizable somehow, the course came into awareness. And that was where the mind training made it more cognitive. Like, it's always been on a feeling level for me, but it made it more just more understandable on a cognitive level. And so, yes, mind training needed to happen for discipline, for this total attentiveness in the spirit that's in every moment now. It's not compartmentalized. And so it's a feeling that seems to just come from within. But within means from beyond. Right. And there's just that sense of it. What was your question?
I was actually starting to go into an experience where I couldn't remember there either now. The two voices, discerning and yeah. I think you've answered it actually. I think, but if there's something else that comes in, I feel you were just It's beautiful. Beautiful.
And the other thing that seems to be more in awareness now is that the screen is looked on, and actions seem to be taken, and the body seems to be moved, and words seem to be spoken, but the words aren't spoken from a person. They could be anything, but it seems to be almost like they're involuntary. There's no planning. But what I see is they've always been involuntary. It's almost like a commentary on the screen that's sometimes just as meaningless as the screen itself.
Right. That's good.
But what needs to be spoken is spoken, and either received or not. There's no attachment. There's no desire for any of it to be heard or not. Or, like you say, even this recording, who knows who'll listen and who won't? It's irrelevant. Yeah.
Can you just tell us whatever comes to mind around the idea of inspiration, like true inspiration? Even sort of I'm hearing like versus the idea of like sacrifice. Because I see in the recent time I spent with you in Hawaii, I could really feel this sense of you living from this inspired place. It didn't matter what I saw you doing, you know, whether you were there at the temple just looking so restful, whether you were, you know, seemingly your body was in an active thing, if you like, or whether you were painting, which I know is something that you have a great passion for. Can you just tell us around, just talk around inspiration, and how this path really is not about any kind of sacrifice in any way. Yeah.
Absolutely. Absolutely. It's letting go the idea of sacrifice that allows living in the spirit, inspired in the spirit's direction, and in just being moved. The idea of sacrifice has to go before that can be fully experienced. There is no sacrifice. Truly, the ego wants us to believe that we're sacrificing something valuable, but gradually, and I'm so grateful for the gentleness of how everything has dropped from awareness. But the only way that I've seen that happen is because of the dedicated desire for peace and for God. Then in that desire, everything naturally falls. It's like looking on it and recognizing it actually then is bringing it to the light and seeing it as false. It's not that the spirit has to do anything with it. It's just really the recognition and the looking on it from that place of desire for God actually has it then falling away naturally. It has it falling away naturally in the mind, and so it can't be seen even as a sacrifice. Right. It's just gone. Right. It disappears of its own volition somehow. So then, as all the desire for anything in the world, there's no wanting. Right. There's no actual wanting in the mind, and so when there's no wanting, the spaciousness is there to be inspired in every moment for what's presented. You know, like what's given right now. What is it now that's given? And that's the joy of that, and the gratitude for it is so huge. I do find myself in tears quite often in full gratitude for it. It's absolutely glorious. Yeah. And it looks, like you said, it looks different in every moment. It can be anything. It can be doing the gardening or painting floors or painting a painting. You know, yeah, exactly. Taking out the trash, doing whatever it is. There's just it's fluid. There's a fluid ease with it.
Jackie, can you talk to us about messengers of peace? What you're a messenger of peace. What does that mean to you? What does that conjure up? What is just how has that symbol been helpful for you? Because anything around that just feels it'd be great.
Okay. Well.
We can edit if we want to. I can edit it. Yeah, or not. That's great.
Or not. It's so trippy, isn't it?
It's beautiful.
Yeah.
I might leave it in. Actually, it's like it's great. It's very real and alive. Yeah. Oh well. Yeah. That's yeah.
Was David came into awareness as a symbol of a way to follow the Jesus message, which brings the mind to a place of peace. And initially, that's it. It's like, okay, I can see there's an undisturbed mind there, and he's followed this pathway that Jesus laid out and gone beyond it. So that was I could see, here's the evidence. This works. And that's my desire. I want to be in that place of peace and lack of disturbance. And so, and then I could see, Kirsten, of course, became a messenger, and then Jason. And so right from that catalyst of Kirsten joining, I watched. I just watched and observed, kept doing my work, using the worksheets, using MMT, just kept on and stayed in connection, and eventually went to Australia and had community houses there, and that was when companions came and joined, and it just seemed that it was a very helpful symbol in my mind. It was truly the highest demonstration that I could have been given. And so that was its helpfulness. And then when it was time to join, it was just such a natural process. I can't say there was anything, any hooks around it, or anything that seemed to catch anywhere, because it was a natural progression then, of a way of being that I just knew was the direction. Like there's no resistance. Everything is so given that the only pain in the mind is the resistance. And so the lack of resistance seemed to make it so much easier. The flow just happened. And it seemed that while all of the undoing was taking place, the symbol of messengers was very important. But at some point, I did hear in my mind, follow no man. And truly, it's not, yes, David is a man, but it's that symbol of the Spirit working, and that symbol of I am that is now so much more in awareness, dropping the symbol of the man, because I don't require the man to be perfect. Right. There is no such thing. And so that message for me was another turning point. It was another way of seeing, actually, that only what's in this world, it can only be used in the desire for truth until truth is experienced. And so to cling to some sort of idea of a man being truth, if you like, right, it's a false idea. It's like the guru has to drop, if we're going to put it in terms of Eastern philosophies, because the guru is in the mind, yes, as a symbol, and really that's what Jesus is saying when he says, when you've dropped this course, drop everything to come to the fullness of truth, the vastness of mind, to then be able to see the illusory nature of it all. And so really, messengers of peace, it's a very helpful symbol, and it is used, like even Now the direction seems to be to go out and share and shine this message of truth. I don't feel that I'm a great speaker. I don't feel that I've had that sort of public profile. I've had a very introspective, contemplative journey in a lot of ways. But even so, I do see that this body is used as a symbol of the Christ mind, of the of demonstrating this pathway.
Right.
Yeah. And so that symbol seems to have the label of messengers of peace, and that can be quite helpful, I think, just as a recognition of that.
Yes. Yeah, and you talked on then that it's feeling like the timing or this period of extending, of getting out and shining and sharing, and it feels like it leads beautifully into if there's anything you feel to share around some of these upcoming gatherings starting in October, I think, isn't it? Yeah, is there anything you're feeling to share about? I know there's the Dublin retreat, October 10 to 15, and you'll be in Sweden. It's just you and Kirsten in Sweden, is that right? From October 24 to
Yes, it is.
26.
Yes.
Mm.
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
Mm.
Yeah. Oh, yes, I'm so looking forward to it. Kirsten and I spent some time in Ireland in, when was it? 2009, I think it was. We were there. Staying in Sarah's house in Tipperary, but we met some beautiful friends down there. Linda O'Flaherty is arranging that that retreat in Dublin, and there's going to be David, Francis, Jason, Michael, Kirsten, and myself. So there are going to be 6 of us there, and it should be a lot of fun. I'm really looking forward to reconnecting with some of those people that we met when we were in Ireland last. Very precious and very devoted, and it was a beautiful time. So yes, that's upcoming. I'll be in England briefly before that, and I'm doing a weekend down in Poole at Crescento's house, just as a taster of community living, so that people can come together and live in his house in community. It's small because the numbers are limited, so that's just a weekend on the way over to Ireland. And then Kirsten and I go to Sweden for 3 days, and the rest of the crew then continue on around Europe and then on down to South Africa. And I come back to Utah. So mine's pretty brief, but I'm so looking forward to it. It's it's feeling very sparkly.
Beautiful.
Thank
So
you.
would you say that the best way, if anyone's listening and they're going, oh, I want to find out more, and perhaps they're not sure where to go, the website livingmiraclescentre.org, that would be the best information, I guess, to give out, best detail, the simplest way, I'd say, livingmiraclecentre.org, and up the top there, just click on the coming events tab, and you'll just see a whole variety of different options, gathering retreats. Jackie has just mentioned that she's going to be on several there, one in Dublin and one in Sweden, and there's a number of other gatherings. So you can, for more specific details as far as contact numbers, you can find them all out from that coming events page. So, Jackie, thank you so much for joining. It's been an
Thank
absolute
you.
treat. I really, it's been beautiful, and thank you so much for for giving of yourself and your time, and for your deep devotion in answering this call, because I know for me it's just you answering your call has really totally helped me to answer mine, and I know that that's how we help one another, isn't it? We sort of when one steps up, it's like it's it's like the meeting I described when I first met you was like you were giving me an invitation to do the same, and so thank you so much, and thank you for today.
I love you, Colin. You're always in my heart. Thank you so much.
Oh,
Yeah,
love you.
beautiful.
Thanks.